and then we are going to go live on Facebook. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you who will be joining us later after the recording, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good in the middle of the night if you're watching this in the middle of the night. We are continuing our study on the life of Joseph. And so we've been in this for a while now. I think this is the 9th week we have been studying Joseph. We've had some weeks that we didn't do Bible study. But we are journeying with Joseph, and we are in Genesis chapter 43. We left off, I should say, at 43. And we have our study guide, and on our study guide, we are on page 5 of our study guide.
Father Charles, please excuse me. You have Miriam waiting to get in.
I already admitted her. Okay. We're just waiting for her to clear. She's in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So we are in chapter 43, and we talked about the brothers are now returning to Egypt because they're hungry. So the brothers are hungry, and they're returning to Egypt. And we talked about how Judah is taking a leadership role in the family. They've got to take Benjamin down there. They ain't getting no food if they don't. And so in 43 verses 11 through 14, Jacob is sending them with all the best of Canaan as a gift. He's also blessing them, and we talked about that this is the first time in the Bible that mercy is connected with blessing, that God Almighty grants you mercy. This is the first time that mercy is being used, and mercy is a covenant word. You will find out that God's name becomes connected with mercy, Yahweh, whose loving kindness, whose hesed, whose mercy. That's the same word. And so now we are learning how they're viewing God. He's praying for mercy upon his sons because he needs mercy to get both of his sons back, that Benjamin be protected and Simeon is let go. And so in verse 15, 43:15, and so the men being the brothers, packed Jacob's gifts and doubled the money and headed off for Benjamin. They finally arrived in Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the manager of his household, "These men will eat with me this noon. Take them inside the palace, then go slaughter an animal and prepare a big feast." So the man did as Joseph told him and took them into Joseph's palace. The brothers were terrified when they saw that they were being taken into Joseph's house. It's because of the money. Someone put in our sacks last time we were here, they said, he plans to pretend that we stole it. Then he will seize us and make us slaves and take our donkeys. So on page 5, on the little 3 eyes, the Roman numeral 3, it says that Joseph sees Benjamin and tells his servants that the brothers will eat lunch with him. The brothers think that they are being punished for the money in their sacks, and they are afraid that the feast is a trick. So when they come into the house, they will be trapped and become slaves. So basically their thinking is, Joseph, it's a sting operation. Joseph gonna bring us in. Oh, we're gonna have lunch together. Then all of a sudden, boom, spring the trap. Because they're afraid that they have been found out about the money. So look what the brothers do in verse 19, 43:19. The brothers approached the manager of Joseph's household and spoke to him at the entrance to the palace. Notice, they ain't wanting to go in. You see that? Sir, they said, we came to Egypt once before to buy food. But as we were returning home, we stopped for the night and opened our sacks. Then we discovered that each man's money, the exact amount paid, was in the top of his sack. Here it is. We have brought it back with us. We also have additional money to buy more food. We have no idea who put that money in our sacks. Relax. Don't be afraid, the household manager told them. Your God, the God of your father, must have put this treasure into your sacks. I know I have received your payment. Then he released Simeon and brought him out to them. Notice this. Notice what the servant says. It's a miracle. You got money. You know, God has smiled upon you, has shown your favor. Your God, the God of your fathers, you know, the God that you serve, has smiled upon you. Because trust me, I'm the household manager. Now look at this. Look at the prominent role this household manager plays. Why? Why is there emphasis on the person who serves Joseph? Because Joseph was that person. This is who Joseph was to Potiphar. And in many ways, this is who he was to his dad. This is who he was to Potiphar. This is who he was in the jail. You know, in some ways, this is who he is to Pharaoh, but he's actually equal to Pharaoh in many respects. So there's this emphasis on the household servants. And so the brothers are afraid. They're afraid they'll be accused of thievery. So what are they doing? They are doing damage control. They being really honest. Listen, we got this sacks. We got some money in it. It ain't our money. We don't know what happened, but we're going to return it to you. And we got more to buy. And the household servant, and it's funny, they say, we do not know who put it in there. And yet they are talking to the very person whom Joseph told to put it in there. And I wonder if he said with a gleam in his eye, the Lord has provided. God has given you this miracle. Just receive, relax. You're not in trouble. But they're afraid. Why are they afraid? They're afraid that they're going to have to pay for the sin of Joseph, of what they did. They assume probably now that he's dead. We'll see that later on. And so the household manager is saying, I've received your payment. But look what Joseph is. Joseph is a man of his word. Because what happens? They bring Benjamin, and, you know, they're talking, and he releases Simeon. And the manager, verse 24, the manager then led the men into Joseph's palace. He gave them water to wash their feet and provided even for their donkeys. They were told they were eating there, so they prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival. In those days, it was always customary, if you were coming into a presence of a king, you better have some kind of gift. And we talked about this. This is why the book of Proverbs says that a gift will bring you in the presence of great people. Some translations will say will put you in the presence of a king. And a lot of times we look at that verse and we've interpreted it this way, that my gift, whatever God's gift he's given to me, is going to put me in front of great people. And that, all I got to do is have the gift and I'm going to be put in front of these people. And a lot of times people would then use that gift to manipulate, to get in front of people in order to talk to them. Y'all get what I'm saying when I say that? You've seen people who want to get in and use their gift. But what people don't realize about that verse, but we can see in this context, the only reason you can give a gift to a king or somebody in authority is what? If you're invited. Even with Joseph telling the butler to remember me when you go before the king, remember me. It's only at the invitation of Pharaoh that Joseph himself goes and interprets the dream. And it's only at the invitation of God do we get salvation. It's only at the invitation of God and his grace that we're even invited. We don't work for God. A lot of times and we all say it, we work for God as though he is a boss. No. We work with him because we're sons and daughters and the household is ours. Just like Joseph has all of the household of Egypt and is equal to Pharaoh in many respects because of his position, because of Jesus, and because we're sons and daughters in him, we have that same position. So we don't work for a position, we work from a position. We are not slaves. Now we are servants because we serve out of an abundance of all the goodness and the mercy that God has had for us. So, Joseph in verse 26, or verse 27, actually verse 26, when Joseph came home, they gave him the gifts they had brought him, and then bowed low before him. After greeting them, he asked, "How is your father, the old man you spoke about? Is he still living?" Now, he's already asked this question before. But you got to realize, it's probably been a good 3 to 4 months between their visits, if more. If you think it takes about a month to get down there, maybe 3 weeks, and they've been living off the grain, let's say 4 to 6 months. So if they haven't seen Joseph in 6 months, he hasn't seen them. He now knows that Benjamin's okay. But now he's asking about Jacob. Let's look on page 5. I'm going to read it, but for those who have it, look in page 5, the next note, Roman numeral 4. It says, the brothers and Benjamin bowed down to Joseph, fulfilling the 11 stars, bowing to Joseph's star. Remember the dream. Remember he has it. And they're all going to bow down to him. And Joseph receives the gifts and inquires about his father and speaks to Benjamin. In inquiring about Jacob being alive, Joseph is concerned that in the midst of the famine, that his health is well. Remember, they're in a famine. Page 6, because during famines, and as we know, pandemics, it is the old and the young who suffer the most. And then, what does Joseph do? Let's look back at verse 29. Then Joseph looked at his brother Benjamin, the son of his own mother. Remember, this is Rachel. They're the only two fully blood brothers from Rachel. And so verse 28, we'll do the 28. Yes, they replied, our father, your servant, is alive and well. And they bowed low again. So they're bowing again. Then we'll go to 29. Joseph looked at his brother Benjamin, the son of his own mother. Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about? And then Joseph blesses him. He says, may God be gracious to you, my son. So you had Jacob calling on mercy. You know, they have mercy. And now Joseph is praying over Benjamin that God would be gracious. I believe this is the 1, 2, 3. I think this is the third or fourth time that God is now alluded to in this section. You know, either alluded to that, you know, God's going to bring judgment. We're being punished for our sins, a blessing from God, or, you know, a blessing from somebody asking God a blessing. And now Benjamin gets blessed. But look what happens. After he sets eyes on his brother, you got to realize that Benjamin would have been young. Joseph is 17. He's probably at this point between 30 and 31. And here is Benjamin. Benjamin may have been 5. Let's say he's 5. Let's put him at 5. You know, 17 years later, he is 21 years old. So he's probably about around the age, maybe, or age range, take a few years, as Joseph was when he went to Egypt. And what does he do? Here it is the second time. Then Joseph hurried from the room because he was overcome with emotion for his brother. He went into his private room where he broke down and wept. After washing his face, he came back out, keeping himself under control. Then he ordered, bring out the food. Now, we've been talking about this, haven't we? We've been talking about Joseph's own inward psychological struggle. You know, how does he respond? And in some ways, he's just reacting. But, you know, and what looks like reaction is really a calculated response. The reason he wanted to know that Benjamin was taken care of and brought there because he wanted to see with his own eyes, is Benjamin alive? Because they killed me. And he knew that Benjamin would be as his name means, Benjamin means the son of my right hand, would be favored. So how have they treated Benjamin growing up? Did they treat him like me? First and foremost, you kind of get the impression from the text that Benjamin ain't like Joseph. Meaning, Benjamin ain't going around, number one, having dreams, and number two, bragging about being in charge. You know, he's not shooting off his mouth. Number two, I think what we see about Benjamin is that the boys saw what it did to their daddy. And they're not going to mess with Benjamin. So, you know, that we see this with Judah and Reuben trying to step in saying, we'll take care of them. Judah says, I'll lay down my life for him. And so on 5, on 6, it says that Joseph brings them into a big feast, but does not eat with them, because Egyptians do not eat with the Canaanites. And we'll see that. Let's go to verse 32, when we will read to the end of the chapter. The waiters served Joseph at his own table. The king would have his own table, kind of so to speak. And his brothers were served at a separate table. The Egyptians who ate with Joseph sat at their own table because Egyptians despise Hebrews and refused to eat with them. Joseph told each of his brothers where to sit, and to their amazement, he seated them according to age, from oldest to youngest. At that point, they do believe he does, practice some divination, and he is an oracle. And Joseph filled their plates with food from his own table, giving Benjamin 5 times as much as he gave the others. So they feasted and drank freely with him. So back to our notes, then we'll work through it. Benjamin gets a 5-fold portion. The feast mirrors the brothers eating the food that Joseph brought them after they threw him in the cistern. If you see what Joseph is doing, he is in some way mirroring with his brothers what happened to him. However, for the most part, he has given them a lot of grace and a lot of mercy that he did not receive. He did not receive. So the feast represents that lunch they had. The brothers are amazed by not only Benjamin's portion, but they're seated in order of their age. Benjamin's portion should have tipped the brothers off that it was Joseph. But as we know, and we have seen, Joseph's brothers are not the brightest of the bunch. Let's just be honest. I mean, we all know that reading from the text. I believe the reason that Jacob favored Joseph more than the other brothers is that Joseph shared his intellect. Not only was he born from Rachel, but he shared his intellect. And you see that in that, his brothers are not, I think they're just overwhelmed. They don't know what's going on. But they probably were shocked, like, why does he get 5-fold? And then sometimes Christian numerology, 5 is also the number of grace. So his extra helpings, meaning he's getting extra favor, extra grace. When I was growing up, I had an aunt who was, I was her favorite. I was actually my favorite to her more so than her own children at times. And we shared the same birthday. And each year, she would get my name and buy me a good present. I could always expect a good present. One year, she didn't get my name and somebody else did. Let me tell you, I got a good present from her that year too, because I was favored. And it didn't, and some of the family complained about it, like, why is she going to give him a gift and blah, blah, blah. As a 10-year-old boy, I wasn't complaining. Not at all. And we've seen how favor has worked its way throughout families, good and bad. And I think what you're seeing with this family dynamic is how favor can work its way, can bring resentment, can bring bitterness, can bring all kinds of things. But we all know that within our families, we've always had a favored person or favored, best friend or something. We all show favor in different ways, but they didn't get the message. Joseph is trying to reveal his identity to them, but they're not getting it. Joseph is trying to test his brothers. And the testing here is, will they be jealous of Benjamin getting more food than them? I think what the brothers are actually asking is why. Why, as the youngest, he's getting food? We don't know this man. This man don't know us. But at the same time, there's been so much going on and so much disorienting episodes, so to speak, that they don't know what to expect. They're getting money that they gave out. They're getting invited to the banquet. And it's the way you look at life too. You get invited to this banquet. Do you get jealous over the person who gets more, or are we happy to be at the table? That's the question. Some people would just be jealous. They're not happy to be at the table. They're just mad because somebody else got more than them. And do we do that in our own lives? When we see others getting more, how do we respond to that, or do we react in jealousy? This is the test. Because Joseph says, if they treated me bad being favored, will they treat him bad? Now, we got to deal with the issue here, is why that Egyptians did not eat with Hebrews or the Habaru people. There are probably two reasons. One, they are shepherds. And there were times in Egypt that they looked down on shepherds because you're those wandering peoples. Two, it's probably because the Habaru, the Hebrews, ate cattle. And if you know anything about Egyptian religion, cattle are revered in Egyptian religion. So the rabbi said they didn't want to do anything to do with Hebrews because they ate the cow that the Egyptians worshipped. And so those may be factors, but we all know that in those days, every country, every nation, every tribal system had its own purity laws. In our Bible, when we start getting into the life of Moses, we'll pick up very few of them to teach on. But there's a whole book called Leviticus. And Leviticus is all about purity laws. And it's just not about religious purity, It's about if somebody is sick, quarantine them for 2 weeks outside the camp. That's in the Bible. In fact, it says, give them 7 days, and if they don't recover, give them another week. So a lot of the purity laws in the Bible, when it came to blood, when it came to bleeding, even with women, when they were on their cycles, we look at that and say, oh my God, how can they be so just uncouth? Well, we judge them by 21st century standards. But for them, the thing is, when you don't have good sanitation, this is a way of having sanitation in the context you're in. Now, there were some things that were attached to it, taboo laws and everything like that, that we see Jesus crossing those boundaries when he comes. However, for example, the book of Leviticus will talk about don't grill meats together on the same grill. Like don't grill one meat and then grill another. And the reason was, why? Cross-contamination. So all of these purity laws that we kind of make fun of in Leviticus, some of them are actually making sense in this pandemic. Social isolation and go scrub your house and make sure, go get checked out and go get tested and things of that nature. Leviticus talks about that. And the Egyptians had their own too. They had their own case system. They had their own system. So this is why Joseph is not sitting with his brothers. This is also why, while Potiphar at that time wouldn't let Joseph fix his food. He probably could have served it, maybe, but still kind of been unclean. And even the Jews themselves, the Hebrews themselves, remember they couldn't eat with Gentiles because Gentiles were unclean, because Gentiles ate pig and other unclean animals. So some people felt okay to sit with Gentiles and eat as long as they didn't eat their food. Others felt like that even being around them and eating with them was bad. You also have the same thing in the New Testament when it talks about food sacrificed to idols. All food in some ways were sacrificed to an idol or to a god. And you ate it afterwards. And so Paul has to say, if you don't know, don't ask, don't tell. Pray over it, give thanks to it, let God, work through it. If you actually went to a pagan feast and you celebrated with their other gods and you're eating it, then we've got an issue. Because at that point, the food becomes sacramental. It's just like us partaking of the Eucharist. That makes sense. But the rabbis were saying that it was because Semitic peoples ate cattle and the Egyptians did not. And so we'll get into a little bit of 44. Chapter 44. When his brothers were ready to leave, Joseph gave these instructions to his palace manager. This is the same palace manager that's been showed up. Household manager, everything else. Fill each of their sacks with as much grain as they can carry, and put each man's money back into his sack. See that? So same thing that's happened before. So the manager did as Joseph instructed him. The brothers were up at dawn and were sent on their journey with their loaded donkeys. But when they had gone only a short distance and were barely out of the city, Joseph said to his palace manager, "Chase after them and stop them. When you catch up with them, ask them, 'Why have you repaid my kindness with such evil? Why have you stolen my master's silver cup or cup of divination?'" And so, let me get back on that. Which he uses to predict the future. What a wicked thing you have done. And when the palace manager called up with the men, he spoke to them as he had been instructed. "What are you talking about?" the brothers responded. "We are your servants and would never do such a thing. Didn't we return the money we found in our sacks? We brought it back all the way from the land of Canaan. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If you find this cup with any of us, then let that man die, and all the rest of us, my Lord, will be your slaves." The boys are confident, aren't they? Confident of their innocence. We haven't done nothing. We ain't got nothing. And so what happens? Verse 11. They all quickly took their sacks from the backs of their donkeys and opened them. The palace manager searched the brothers' sacks from the oldest to the youngest. And the cup was found in whose sack? Benjamin's. What did they say? "Whoever has the cup in their sack, let them die, and we will be your slaves." When the brothers saw this, they tore their clothing in despair. "Oh, my Lord, we promised Daddy we wouldn't let nothing happen to the boy, and now it's about to go down." Joseph was still, so then they loaded their donkeys again and returned to the city. Joseph was still in his palace when Judah and his brothers arrived. Now look at this. Remember, we saw the switch. Remember in the last visit, it was all about Reuben talking. "I told y'all, and then remember what he tells Daddy, 'You can have one of my boys if your boy doesn't come back.' But then when Judah takes the leadership in the second visit to Egypt, and Judah's saying, 'I will give my life for the boy.' Joseph was still in his palace when Judah and his brothers arrived, and they fell to the ground before him. Him who? Joseph. What have you done? Joseph demanded. Don't you know that a man like me can predict the future? Judah answered, Oh, my Lord, Lord being Joseph here. What can we say to you? How can we explain this? How can we prove our innocence? God is punishing us for our sins. My Lord, we have returned to be your slaves, all of us, not just our brother who had your cup in the sack. No, Joseph said, I would never do such a thing. Only the man who stole the cup will be my slave. The rest of you may go back to your father in peace. Now, let's go to our notes on page 6. Lowercase numeral, Roman numeral 6, the V and the I. Joseph sends the brothers on their way with the grain and the money, and he hides his silver divining cup inside Benjamin's sack. The term silver is mentioned 20 times, corresponding with the 20 pieces of silver that Joseph was sold for in the 20 years since he's been gone. Joseph's steward pursues them and arrests them. The brothers declare their innocence, saying that the one with the cup should die. To their dismay, the cup was in Benjamin's sack. And the brothers as a group, and Benjamin in particular, are falsely accused of theft. That should be like Joseph, not like Joseph. Like Joseph was accused by Potiphar's wife of rape. See what he's doing. Everything that he has been tested on, he is testing them. He wants to know what's in their hearts. And so, the divination goblet, the cup of divination, was used. And there's a few long words here, and I promise you I will probably butcher them. So bear with me. You have oleomancy, which is pouring oil into the water. You have the water, you pour the oil into it, and it swirls around, and whatever shapes, you interpret the shapes, and it tells you what's going on. Or hydromancy, which is just the opposite. You have the oil, then you pour the water, and then the person observing the actions of the liquids and the movement. So the person would observe it, and if it makes a little picture, then this picture represents this picture represents that. The diviner would pronounce or whisper an incantation over the cup. The oil and water would mix, producing images that would be divined to answer questions such as if one should go to war, have a child, health, or sickness. Divination was later condemned in the Hebrew scripture, especially in the book of Deuteronomy. Though the rest of the ancient world used these techniques. The Mesopotamians and the Akkadian literature devoted many texts to divination of all sorts. Jewish rabbis wanting to distance Joseph from practicing forbidden arts says that Joseph used this goblet for careful testing. So basically what's going on is that he would have had a goblet like that, especially as an oracle, as seen as an oracle. Did he use it? We don't know. Is this the goblet that he drinks out of and then use? Because, if it touches his lips, it's sacred kind of thing. But what we know from Joseph and what we know from Jewish tradition, that there were some ways of discerning things that later on were probably forbidden. We do know that the ultimate source was not Joseph, but God. And that he would actually say that God gives the interpretation. And that he would, and I think he's using this cup as a ruse. They would have probably seen that cup on the table. If it's his regular drinking cup that he may use for these things, they would have seen it. They would have known which one it was. Also, it gives great memory. They think he's an Egyptian oracle. They don't realize that it's their brother who's gifted. So he has to put on the facade. And they already think he's an oracle because of he's arranged them to age. How would he know their ages? Unless he's getting some kind of knowledge beyond himself. Jewish tradition also said that he told them what kind of beds they slept in. Now, Joseph may have known this because of living there years ago. So he's given this thing. And he says, don't you know I'm a diviner? You might as well tell me because I know already. He is pulling all of the mentalist tricks there is. And so, but look what happens. Here's the mercy part, which we don't see. Remember, they are saying, well, the man who stole it should die, right? And then all of us will become your slaves. And even the household servant says, no, we're not going to do that. And even Joseph himself, what mitigates? Because they put a curse on themselves. And Joseph goes, be it unto your word. Okay. But what does Joseph say? You can go home to your father in peace. I'll keep the boy as a slave. And so, look at that phrase. Your translation may be different, but I like the way the New Living Translation says it. The rest of you may go back to your father in peace. They know if they go to their father without Benjamin, guess what? There ain't no peace. In fact, Jacob going to do another melodramatic. You have done this to me a third time. Well, I got Simeon back, but I've lost both of my favorite sons from my favorite wife. And we will stop right there and open up for some discussion. Let's see. If you can unmute yourselves, please. So we can have some discussion. Okay, Faye's not muted. Okay, so everybody else. So, thoughts, questions, concerns as we've journeyed with Joseph here. What's this speaking to you?
Twists and turns.
Twists and turns. Yes, indeed. Twist.
It was interesting how you uncovered that scripture that where it was misinterpreted about the gifts.
Yeah.
I heard that all my life. How your gift will take you before kings. And matter of fact, I think somebody spoke that over me in a prayer once. And that was really, it was really interesting to hear that.
And in the context of that proverb, and most of these proverbs, even in the book of Proverbs, are attributed to Solomon or its kingly wisdom. Actually, this is for free. I'm not even going to charge you for it. There are 2 chapters, I believe 2 chapters in the book of Proverbs. One comes from a foreign king, and others are also taken from Egyptian wisdom. Because back then, if you had a wise saying, it didn't matter who said it. You always say somebody said it.
Right.
It's like in my sermons, if I see a good quote, I'll attribute who made the quote. Second time I preach that sermon, it says somebody said. by the time I get to the third and fourth time doing that quote, it's like I always say, you know, and we've got these old quotes. But yes, you had to be invited into the presence of the king. They're invited to a feast. Joseph is invited into Pharaoh's house. And when you are invited, you did bring a gift. You always brought a gift to a holy man or a king. Is out of respect. This is why we hear things about when you go into the house of God, bring your gifts. And that could have been, in those days, sacrificial gifts, fruit, monetary, you name it, because God is seen, Yahweh is seen as king. And we now know that, that kingship is shared with his son, Jesus, that we talked about last Sunday. So yes, that is a verse that's taken out of context and people don't realize, and that's the importance of knowing the context of scripture. Any other things? What struck you in this that's going on with Joseph or his brothers?
I guess I don't want to sound stupid, but why does he keep testing his brothers like this?
Because he's wanting to know what kind of heart they were. You got to remember, they sold him into slavery. They sold him in 37. Yeah, 37. I always get, yeah. In chapter 37, they sold him into slavery because he was his father's favored child. And he had those dreams. And in those dreams, he tells them, hey, I'm going to rule over you. And they say, no, you won't, because we're going to either kill you or sell you. That's why in the text, the brothers are saying God is getting us for our sins. It ain't the sin that they did. This ain't the sin of they're robbing anything. It's the sin that they did for Joseph, against Joseph. So he's saying, let's see if they're the same old brothers I grew up with and sold me into. He's also trying them, and we'll see it. There won't be any Bible study next week because next week I'm officially on vacation. But the following week, he wants to know, will they treat Benjamin the same way? Were they, like last week we talked about when Simeon goes into prison, are they going to leave him in prison, take the money and run? Just like they sold him into slavery and ran with the money? Or are they going to try to redeem their brother? And now we will see, he wants to know, here is Benjamin, the favored child. Are they going to let him stay as a slave in Egypt? Like they sold him into slavery? Or will they stick up for him? Because if they stick up for him, Benjamin that is, that means they've changed. If they don't, and leave him there, and go back, then that means they have not changed. Just like he's trying their character, because as we have talked about, forgiveness is given freely, trust is earned. And how many times have we talked about in the church forgiveness? Forgive that person. And sometimes in the church, that comes off as we are going to forgive them. And that means, oh, you just forget about everything. No. You forgive them. You let them go of the debt. But that don't mean you around them all the time. Especially let's talk about abusive relationships. Let's talk about these kinds of things that happen. You forgive that person. You let them go. You put them in the hands of God. That doesn't mean you go back to them. So he's trying their character. And we talked a little bit about last week. The word tried is used into purification of silver and gold. You would heat the gold and silver, skim off the impurities so that you have pure gold and pure silver. So what he's doing in all this is, let's see if they changed or not. Let's see. I'm going to put them through some tests. And if they pass my test, I know they've changed. Honest to God, we do it in every relationship we're in so many ways. We'll put a positive spin. But what? We're gonna give you a probation period. See if you can do it. Or what happens is when we've been hurt in other relationships, we project that hurt onto others and sometimes make them pay for relationship stuff that they never did. And so I think there's a mixture of all of this in Joseph. He's reacting, he's projecting, he you know, there is some, you know, let's see what they're going to do. I think this is why he goes off and cries. This is the second time. Remember, we encountered the second time. He's crying. You know, how do I put this up? How do I do this? And so in all of that, I think with Joseph, we're seeing his psychological anguish. He's still hurt. He's gonna project some of that on there. So I think it's all of the above. So, and I think when we get into, not next week, but the week after Bible study, we'll understand what he's doing. Because you'll see some things happen. So now I'm just holding us in suspense right now. You can go ahead and read ahead, and then I think that'll explain, oh, this is why he's doing what he's doing. But he just wants to make sure, have you changed? It's like when you get back with an ex-lover. And you get with that person. You know, I've changed. Have they changed because it's quote unquote jailhouse religion because they're getting threatened with punishment? Or are they changed because they're going to give themselves for another person? So that's what's going on there. Anything else?
I'm thinking about how parents can set siblings up to not like each other.
And that's what you see in this one. Yes. I mean, Joseph is not pure and holy and innocent in all this. I think I wrote that with just kind of what even the rabbis say about Joseph. They love him. In the end, he's purified, but Joseph goes through a purification process. Rooting all that stuff. And I will say this is just as much as Joseph is trying his brothers, but guess who's trying Joseph one more time? God. Joseph, are you going to use your power that I've given you to persecute your brothers and hold it over their heads? So Joseph thinks he's trying his brothers, but in the end, God, this is the last test for Joseph right here. And God is seeing, and that's why he can't keep the facade up. Because, excuse my church language for a moment. I'll use a term that we use in my generation. Joseph is not a hard ass. Joseph is not this kind of person. And he's having to be it. That's why he's breaking down. That's why he's crying. But he wants to make sure, he wants to go through with this because he wants to make sure that his brother's being taken care of and that his brothers are taking care of the daddy too. Y'all haven't kicked him off to some proverbial corner because the one thing I think that Joseph did do when Joseph was there, he took care of Jacob. Does that make sense? He cared for Jacob as much as Jacob cared for him. It wasn't, and it made it into a codependent relationship that both had to be broken off of. So yes, you're right, Miriam. Oh Lord, if any story in the Bible shows that dynamic, it's this one. He set that whole family up for failure. That's why I love the Bible, because it doesn't sanitize nothing. Anything else? What's speaking to you?
What about Joseph's servant? Was he aware of, because Joseph was giving him instructions all the time, was he aware of what Joseph was doing, or was he just being obedient?
That's a good question. I think he might have not known the whole story, but he knew something was up. Now, he would have known the story of how Joseph, because that story becomes kind of the staple. Joseph's rehearsing of his story. I was sold into Egypt. He knows this story. Mm. He would have known that they were being Canaanites, or from Semitic peoples. Um, I think he's doing what he's told to do, but he knows there's something up. Because remember what he tells the brothers. Well, your God did this.
Yeah.
We not, and they're talking to the person who actually carried out the order.
Mm.
But that's a good question, and these are the questions we need to ask about, and this is what, this is why I read you the rabbinical tradition, because they ask these questions. Well, what about that? What is he thinking in all this? He's A, obeying orders, but B, he knows there's a reason why his master is being like this. Because I think he knows it's out of character for Joseph.
Mm.
And he might have went and said, sir, can I ask you a question? Yes. Why are you doing this? And Joseph would probably said at that time, I have my reasons. Can you trust me? There are times where we have to do things. And sometimes we ask God that, why are we doing this, God? This doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And God says, can you trust me on this?
Mm.
Can you trust me? Can you trust me? And I think that's what's going on there. So I think he knows something. He knows he's trying them and he's seeing some things. And I imagine that Joseph would have an intuitive servant like him that he could trust. So Joseph may have never told him, but he probably can put two and two together and get 4. Because he knows that this is a ruse. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you having me plant evidence on people? I mean, on face value, this is an abuse of power.
Right.
Let's just call it. And this is why God is trying it. Joseph, do you really want to take this to its end? And his end would be, I take my brothers out. But we know that Joseph's not like that because he's still weeping over it. But he's wrestling with this because I've got power to do this. And y'all done messed me over. I know I made it. I don't care that I made it. You need to still have justice. And what if justice is not that we get what we deserve, but we get what we need?
Wow.
And what we need is grace and mercy.
Yeah.
So he is working out within him. How do I be merciful and forgiving? And yet I have to test their character. And in some ways, God does that with us. Usually using other people. How are you going to respond to that person? How are you going to react? How are you going to do this? So yeah, that is a great one to talk about. Anybody else? Anybody see anything? What spoke to them? Oh, Lord, people got Thanksgiving on their minds. Hell. So a little bit of housekeeping before we go. So no Bible study next Tuesday. I will be officially on my vacation starting this Sunday. So no Bible study. We'll pick this up the following week. And yes, I promise we will get through Joseph by the end of the year. Because I can't wait to get into Moses. Because that's going to take us some time. Just dealing with Exodus. So I just want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And
Same to you.
And we've got a lot, even in the midst of this pandemic, and even in the midst of all these things, we do have a lot to be thankful for.
Amen.
As individuals, as families, and even as a church family. Throughout all of this craziness and pandemic, God has been good to us. Oh, I do have one last story to share. So last Thursday, I was here in the office getting some paperwork done. And Barbara calls me on the phone. Hey, there's a young couple who's here. They're praying in the chapel. They would like to talk with you. Now, at our church, that could mean a whole lot of things. That could mean they may be young, but they may be all kinds of issues and everything else. And I was like, okay. I'm like, really, Lord? I got to get some paperwork done. But I was obedient. I've learned to be obedient to my office staff. They keep me in line. I go. It is this young couple. The wife was from Brazil, and she had lost her brother, and they can't do anything because, you know, we're in the middle of all COVID and all that stuff. And I met her husband, and they go, we just wanted to pray, and we were looking for a church that was open to pray. And, you know, they were doing safety protocols and all that. And she was just weeping. And I said, can I pray with you? So I prayed with them, gave them communion. And they said, you know, we're going to be back on Sunday. And you'd be honest, I hear that a lot of times. You know what I mean? They came back to our church, and they want to be a part of our church because they felt welcomed here. And I said, you know what? We do a lot more welcoming when there's no pandemic. Trust me, passing of the peace takes about 15 minutes, you know, pre-pandemic. But I say this is how God is blessing us even in the midst of our pandemic. And so we've got good things that are happening. So, you know, just be praying. And I think God is using this pandemic to prepare us for what he has us to do post-pandemic, whenever that is. The Lord be with you.
And also,
Also with
you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we are thankful. We are thankful for mercy and forgiveness and love, God. Even when we're going through the midst of trials and tribulations, God, we thank you that you are good, that you have hesed, that you have loving kindness. Oh God, let us be mindful on this Thursday to be thankful that you are good and your mercy endures forever, and we give you thanks for that. But let us be mindful and thankful, God, for not only mercy that has been given by you, but the mercy and grace that we can give to others, especially in this time of pandemic, especially in this time of isolation, when things may be on edge, people may be on edge, and people are scared, Lord. Let us be instruments of your peace and your love, because your Son is the way of love, the perfect way of love that casts out fear. And so we ask all these things in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
man,
Amen. Thank you, Father
Amen.
Charles. Enjoy your
All right.
time off.
happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Happy
I got the
Thanksgiving.
printouts for Gloria, Lorraine. Nobody's come to pick them up.